Greetings, Phi Theta Kappa. My name is Rob Keel, and I'm here to share a little bit about applicant tracking systems and how they're used to acquire talent by different companies. Applicant tracking systems are systems that are used to process high volumes of applications and narrow down pools of applicants when hiring talent. There are a lot of different things that this type of technology has added to the field of applying for jobs. I hope to give you a few tips that might help you when applying using an applicant tracking system. When applying to jobs at a specific institution, their applicant tracking system that's connected to their online application may allow you to set up a profile. This may take a few more minutes, but it's usually worth it. Computers can have glitches. Sometimes you might need to ask for IT support, and it helps if they can look at your profile and track your activity. Also, things might come up while you're applying, and you might need to pause, save where you're at, and then come back later to finish your application. For all these reasons, I highly recommend setting up a profile when using applicant tracking systems to apply online. A lot of times when people apply to jobs, they have to provide documentation. Documentation might include a resume or CV, transcripts, a cover letter, letters of reference, proof of certifications. All of these things, let's just call supporting documents for now. Now, it's easier if you go ahead and convert these documents to PDFs and have them on a jump drive. When you're getting ready to go do the job hunt thing, make sure you prepare a jump drive full of documents you might need. Carry it with you so that way if they need extra documentation, it's possible that you'll have it with you. By having these in PDF format, it's going to be more user-friendly with the system. Some systems limit the number of documents you can upload, so I recommend having collective PDFs, which is a set of your entire application packed in. The other thing that might happen is you might have to submit certain documents on different screens. So I also recommend having individual PDFs of each supporting document. By having both options readily available on a jump drive, you're more prepared to apply using applicant tracking systems, and the system becomes easier to navigate. One of the things I think is important is to make all files you're going to use for your application compatible with both the system and the system operator. One thing that makes it easier for those of us who have to attach documents or forward documents is to include some identifying mark in the title. This could be as easy as your initials or your last name. But including some identifying mark that's consistent across your documentation, it is easy to see what documents belong with your application. Another thing to think about is file size. Things like photographs can take a huge amount of memory and may not be as easy to upload. Some systems may just not have the capacity. Things like PDFs or Word documents are generally acceptable formats that most systems are used to working with. By keeping something in a format that is easy to upload, you don't risk that the system will not be able to handle the capacity. If you must upload a photograph, if it has something to do with the requirements of the job, I recommend having on the jump drive 3 different sizes of that photograph so you can have the highest resolution without overwhelming the system. Finally, limit the number of characters in your titles. Most systems I've worked with generally need less than 20 characters in a title. So in the title, make sure you get your initials and your name, some identifying word, whether it's resume or cover letter, and keep it all under less than 20 characters. There are a lot of different types of questions that play a role when I program an application in an applicant tracking system. Some questions are there to disqualify people. If you answer these questions wrong, odds are your application will never make it to a human. Some questions are about research. The institution often keeps statistics on every hiring cycle that's used in different reports throughout the year. Other questions just establish ways to communicate, whether that's the phone number or the email or the address. Some questions are about supplemental data. I might put a preferred qualification is that somebody's multilingual. If I ask if you're multilingual, it doesn't mean that you answering that no will disqualify you, but it does mean that you answering that yes might give you an edge over the competition. Another thing that's important to know is that not all questions within a section have the same importance to the hiring managers. Sometimes they have me program certain percentages with each question. One question may be worth 50% of your score, and another question might be worth 25. Another may yet be worth 15 and another worth 10. Altogether, that equals 100% of the score that they'll use to determine who they might interview for the next cycle. But you're not going to know which one of those questions is worth 15% or 10% unless they happen to put it on the cover of the application. Just realize that not all questions are the same. Also, sometimes when you go past a question, the system's programmed to keep you from going back. When people change their answers after they've been booted out, it looks like people are trying to cheat the system. Sometimes it's just that they didn't understand the question. So it's always better to do your research on the front end rather than try and correct it on the back end. I mentioned before that you can't always go back when you're doing an application. In the applicant tracking system, answering a question, especially when it might be tied to one of the minimum qualifications for the position, may require some research. There are some questions that I'll read, and I'll be like, am I qualified for this? Take for an example, a qualification that says, must have master's degree. Now, some programs more and more today are where you can do your doctorate and you don't have to get a master's in between. Now, if you've gotten that doctorate, do you meet that qualification although you never got a master's? This is the type of question I'm talking about when it comes to calling the institution and seeing if they would say you met that criteria. Doing that before you answer the question in the applicant tracking system will keep you from getting red flagged or removed from the pool. Another way people get red flagged is when they set up a secondary account using a different email to try and cheat the system. Say they go through the application once, answer the question in a way that boots them out within the same day, and then they go back and apply because they realize they didn't quite mean what they put before. The system sees this as trying to cheat the system, and it usually adds a red flag or some type of indicator beside your name. Now, this may not mean something to somebody who programmed it and knows that you made a mistake and went back and fixed it, but it's also a red flag that people see, and in the mind, that may be something that makes them put you in a pile of less likely people to be hired. One of the things that systems are getting more efficient at is using keywords in order to find good applicants. Not all people use this function when they're using applicant tracking systems, but most applicant tracking systems have this capacity. There are certain words that might be correlated with an ideal candidate for a certain job. Say somebody wanted to apply to be a Phi Theta Kappa advisor. A person creating that job description might embed words like leadership or scholarship. Those words, if they're used within somebody's resume, might put that person at a higher ranking in the output than a person who doesn't use those words, even if they have some of the same skill. When you're creating your resume, think about keywords that people might look for. Things about innovation or creativity, troubleshooting or team building, project management. These are just a few examples of words that people might be looking for. When you read the cover of the application, see if there are words in your resume that might correlate to some of that vocabulary. A final tip is to make sure your resume isn't too fancy. Computer systems need to be able to convert images into shapes that are recognized as letters and spelled out into words. If your letters are easy to read by the system, then it'll work better with things like adaptive technology if somebody needs something translated into audio or tactile messaging. Or it will also work better with a search function. If somebody is trying to compare education for all applicants, they can type in the search bar, education, and if your font is appropriate, the computer will make it recognizable as a word. By making sure that your resume can be appealing to not just the people, but to the computer, you have a better chance and you get an edge in the application process.